Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition.
Correct.
If you are here, send other people here. Tell them to subscribe, whatever the platform they're on allows of them, and to give us a 5-star review. That way other people can find us and we can become famous.
Mm-hmm.
That is the ultimate goal.
No thanks.
One of my kids, we had a would you rather the other day, and it was like, would you rather know everything about math or everything about music? And we were like, if you know everything about music, you could become famous. I was like, if you knew everything about math, you'd probably also be at least a little bit famous, because that'd be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I would not want to be famous. And they were like, what? Why? I was like, it's scary. I do have a few real-time true crime things. Most of them are local to me, but I feel like they're very big deals around here, so I feel like I should mention them. Last week, I believe there was a shootout between an 18-year-old boy and a Memphis police officer, in which they both died. The source I was looking at didn't list the name of the 18-year-old. I think they do know who it is, because they obviously know who it is because he was there. He's also dead. But they've interviewed his dad, so I think they're being open about who he is. I just don't happen to know his name. But I do know the officer's name because he went to one of the 3 high schools in the county that Katie and I grew up at. And so everyone we know knows him from being in the same area as we grew up in. His name is Joseph McKinney. And they are working on putting some things together to memorialize him. But and alongside that, the family of this 18-year-old boy who passed away would also like to clarify what happened, because they did both die of gunshot wounds from one another. It wasn't like he shot the officer and then himself. They shot at each other. And so there's a lot of investigation going on around that right now, and it's a very big topic. Just trying to figure out exactly what happened. But the DA is calling it friendly fire, which seems odd.
Mm-hmm.
For that situation. And then the other real-time true crime I have is that last night there was a block party in Orange Mound, which is in Memphis, and somebody or a group of people maybe brought guns. 8 people were shot at the block party, and I just had it pulled up on my phone. Yeah, 8 people were shot, and so far 2 of them have passed away. So also fairly big deal, because that's technically a mass shooting. And it was it happened right before we went to bed, I think last night, which we went to bed kind of late last night, later than we normally do. And it had just happened. They said I think they said that 17 shots had been fired. And then the last real-time true crime I have, not local to me, I cannot believe we didn't say this last week. O.J. Simpson died.
Yes. It was going to go in the pop culture script, but then Mary went buck wild in the pop culture script. And I figured, everyone knows.
My favorite thing about O.J. Simpson dying is that immediately after they announced that he was dead, Logan Paul announced that he was having a baby, and somebody said, "Welcome back, OJ." But yes. So, also, there's a TikTok going around of this guy. He's like, "Oh no, who's next? Casey Anthony?" And he goes, "I said, who's next? Casey Anthony?" I thought you would like that.
Yeah. Casey.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
I as horrible as it sounds, I'm so excited to tell you the story because you don't know a lot about Ed Gein
No.
from what we've discussed, and that's crazy to me. So
I refrained from listening to Morbid.
I can't wait to tell. I know. I was talking. Was I telling you or our mom?
Me.
I was like, this has been on my list coming up next for so fucking long. And what are
Mm-hmm.
the odds that they release all 3 parts right before me? Okay. Anyway, mine is not going to be 3 parts. It's just this one. But still good, and I did use them as a source. So,
Nice.
all right, you ready?
Yeah.
On November 16th, 1957, Plainfield, Wisconsin's Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden entered his family's hardware store at 5 p.m., expecting to see his mother, but instead finding an empty store. The cash register was open and the floor was covered in blood. Luckily, he is the deputy sheriff. So he reached out to his fellow investigators to let them know his mother had disappeared and that he already had an idea of who might have her. He had
Okay, West
found
Memphis Police.
Mhm. He had found a sales slip on the counter for antifreeze written to Ed Gein. And he said Gein had been coming around to the store a lot recently, and the Worden family was already kind of becoming weary of him. They were getting tired of him being there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
With the receipt as evidence, Gein was arrested at a nearby grocery store in the Waushara?
Perfect.
Waushara?
Mm-hmm.
Waushara?
Mm-hmm.
It just sounds like somebody trying to say sounds, but they keep saying in between them. Waushara. County Sheriff's Department made their way to the Gein farm to look for Bernice Worden. But before I tell you what they find on the farm, I'm going to tell you all about Ed Gein's life.
Nice. Awesome.
hmm
Great.
We'll come back. Well, you need a breather first.
Ah!
Oh, on December 11th, 1900. Crazy, I know. 22-year-old Augusta Wilhelmine of La Crosse, Wisconsin, married George Philip Gein. Augusta had actually grown to hate her husband before the two were even married. He was an unemployed alcoholic, and Augusta, a fervently religious Lutheran woman, was put off by her partner's lifestyle choices.
Yeah. Great.
But
Great start.
unfortunately, she firmly believed that women were made to procreate within the confines of marriage, so it was the obvious next step in her relationship with George. Almost exactly 1 year after their wedding in January of 1901, Augusta gave birth to her first son, Henry George Gein, and almost immediately hated him. Augusta had deeply wanted a girl, so she was disappointed when she had a boy, and she admitted that she never connected with him. In 1906, their second son was born, Edward Theodore Gein. Once again, Augusta was disappointed at having a boy, but she decided that she would not allow him to be like the rest of the men of this world. Ed would be her special project. It's never good for a mother to pick a special project amongst her children.
I wouldn't admit that. In
A lot of
hindsight,
things, a lot of things Augusta should have been inside thoughts.
yeah, in hindsight, I would not tell people I worked really hard to make this person
Yeah.
who they are.
Well, I mean, she died before he did anything. But Augusta worked around the clock to provide for and teach her boys. George was the owner of a local grocery store in La Crosse, but given his failures at carpentry, hide tanning, and selling insurance, Augusta was really the one who ran the business. At home, she read to her boys from the Bible, especially from the Old Testament and the Book of Revelation. She taught her boys everything they needed to know about what happens after death, the idea of divine retribution, and why to stay away from women.
Because
All
they're
women,
stupid.
Oh no,
Pea-sized brain women.
they're too smart. They're too smart. All women, according to Augusta Gein, were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. They would eventually be punished by God for their actions, and her boys did not need to be anywhere near them. She said, you don't want to go down with them. The only woman they could trust was their mother. In fact, she told them that no one else could ever love them, and no one else ever would.
Awesome.
Yeah. During Ed's childhood, Augusta decided that the grocery store wasn't bringing in enough revenue to support their family, and they sold the shop. The family moved to a 155-acre farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, which Ed would live in for the rest of his life. Augusta was not only excited for this new business opportunity, but she was eager to further separate her children from the rest of the secular world. Henry and Ed were only permitted to leave the house to go to school, and even there, Ed began to become isolated from others.
So they still went to, like, public school. Interesting.
I know, I agree. That's a weird choice. But I think it's because their dad was, like, a barely functioning alcoholic, and their mom was, like, tending the farm all day long.
Oh.
I don't think they had much of a choice but to send them to school. Teachers and students generally regarded Ed as odd. They said he would laugh to himself when no one spoke and had strange mannerisms. Academically, Ed did well with reading, but struggled sometimes due to being so withdrawn. His IQ was either 89 or 99. It's listed differently in different sources, which either one is average, but on the lower end of average. But he was not, we've talked about the IQ bell curve before. He was not below average intelligence, which he did not have any kind of learning or cognitive disabilities. He just was average, but like not
right in the middle.
You know, he was like he was close to below average, but he wasn't. When Ed did try to make friends, Augusta would quickly put a stop to it, convincing him that his schoolmates were evil and then punishing him for being around them. Because of this, Ed spent most of his time working on the farm, doing chores for his parents, and of course, Bible studying with his mother. In April of 1940, George Gein died of heart failure at the age of 66.
Goodbye.
He had been... Oh, they said, peace out, dude.
Whatever.
He had been getting increasingly sicker for some time and was beginning to become a burden to his wife and sons. Ed and Augusta particularly were thrilled when George passed away, and they were finally rid of him. They said, thank fucking God.
Riddance.
On the downside, though, this left Ed and Henry to pick up the monetary slack and find additional ways to make money. They're like grown-ups at this point.
Yeah.
They began doing odd jobs and really became staples in their community. They were two men their neighbors could trust and rely on, and soon Ed became everyone's go-to handyman and babysitter.
Ooh.
Ed was extremely helpful with housework and repairs, and he enjoyed babysitting because he always felt that he connected more easily with children than with adults. In fact, his best friend was actually a teenage boy that he had previously babysat. And this 15-year-old boy's mother was like, this is totally normal. We love Ed at our house.
Red flags.
Yeah. It was like, you know, like when your best friend's mom is like a second mother to you, and they're like, oh my gosh, like she's part of the family, like we love her. That's how this teenage boy's mom felt about Ed Gein. She was like, they're besties, we love Ed. Okay. It was a different time, I guess. The 40s. As Ed and his brother became more independent and mature, Henry fell in love with a single mother of two. He told Ed that he was planning to move in with this divorcee, and Ed was confused about
we hate women.
He said, what? He said, why would you ever want to leave the farm? And specifically, why would you ever want to leave Mom? She's the best.
Yeah, what?
And Henry explained to Ed that their upbringing was extremely traumatizing for him.
Wow.
He said, Ed, we were very repressed by our mother's strict rules and religious views, and he told him that he wanted to get out of the home and far away from Augusta Gein.
Hmm.
And in fact, he told him that he was worried about how attached Ed had become to their mother.
Yeah.
Ed was shocked. He was floored. This is news to him. This was the first time he had ever heard Henry speak ill of their mother, and he was deeply offended
That does
that
kind of suck,
anyone.
though, that
Yeah.
Henry doesn't tell him any of this until he's like, I'm leaving.
Yeah. He did not understand how anyone could hate Augusta. She was everything to him. And the news of Henry's disdain for her was incredibly hurtful. He was like, he like could not wrap his head around it. But Henry would not remain a problem for long. On May 16th, 1944, the local fire department rushed to the Gein farm after noticing the property engulfed in flames.
Hmm.
Ed said that he and Henry had been burning away marsh vegetation when the fire got away from them and spread quicker than they could keep up with. The volunteer firefighters worked tirelessly to extinguish the fire. By the end of the day, though, Henry was nowhere to be found, and Ed was forced to report him missing. A search party went out to search for Henry, and almost immediately, Ed was able to lead searchers to 43-year-old Henry's body. He was found lying face down, far away from the fire itself, and peculiarly, investigators were able to determine that Henry had been dead for some time, which is strange because Ed said that he was part of starting the fire.
Why is he so far from the fire? Ed?
At the time he was found, there was no sign of burns or smoke inhalation, and Henry's cause of death was ruled as heart failure, just like his father. I will say this was like by default. They were like,
Yeah.
we can't figure out what happened to him. There's no signs of anything, so like his heart must have just stopped. And this is like, and that's like normal in the 40s.
Yeah.
But they later noticed that Henry had bruises all over his head, and there were signs of asphyxiation. No formal autopsy was ever performed, and no official investigation was conducted, but they did change the cause of death officially to asphyxiation after seeing the bruising on his neck.
Ed, why you don't throw him in the fire?
Like,
At least. What?
It's the fact that like that Henry was part of his story. He was like, Henry and
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
us two brothers, we started
Uh-huh.
this fire. It got out of control, and like, is the implication then that Henry ran away because he's clearly nowhere near the fire? He clearly had no contact with the fire,
Yeah.
and he was dead before the fire started.
Yeah.
Dumb as
Friend.
shit. After Henry's death, Ed and Augusta, I can't fucking talk.
Augustus Scoop. Augustus Scoop.
I tried to watch Wonka the other day. I could not finish it.
Oh
I
no.
didn't like it. After Henry's death, Ed and Augusta somehow grew even closer than they were before. And I say somehow because, like, he lived inside her asshole. Like,
Yeah.
how could these two get closer? She had suffered a stroke shortly after Henry had passed away and was paralyzed as a result. Ed threw himself into caring for his mother. Of course he did.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up having a second stroke in 1945 after undergoing a series of stressors. Ed explained one event that happened shortly before Augusta's second stroke, which he felt had caused her some stress. Like, this is just one of the many things that stressed her out, he said. The two of them had gone to purchase straw from a man named Mr. Smith. When they got to his residence, Mr. Smith began to beat a dog. And when a woman came out of the home and begged him to stop, he not only kept going, but beat the dog to death. Ed recalled how upset his mother was at the fact that the woman who had been inside Mr. Smith's home that day was not married to him.
Oh.
Yeah, she did not care about the dog part.
Mm-mm.
She told Ed that this woman was a harlot, She had no business being in that house because they were not married. After her second stroke, and but this bugged the shit out of her. Like, he said that it really, really stressed her out. But after her second stroke, Augusta's health rapidly declined until she passed away in December of 1945 at the age of 67.
Oh,
Ed,
shortly after Henry.
yeah. Ed was that's how quickly these strokes are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Ed was devastated, and despite having been isolated his entire life, he felt completely alone for the first time. It's like, what am I going to do without her?
Mm-hmm.
After his mother died, Ed kept up the family farm and his side hustles of odd jobs and babysitting. He received a farm subsidy from the federal government in 1951, but also worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in Plainfield. He eventually sold Henry's 80-acre portion of their land. He became interested in pulp magazines, adventure stories, and Nazi tales.
So
He
fun.
was, which I wonder, what is it like to be interested in Nazi tales as it's happening? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I was fascinated by the Holocaust as a child. But I think by the idea that this seems so far-fetched to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it like to be in that moment, be like, this is crazy.
And I want
I
it.
love reading. I need to know more.
And I want it from the perspective of the Nazis.
Right. He was particularly interested in stories of pirates, cannibalism, and the story of Ilse Koch. Our mom just read about her. She was a Nazi woman who tattooed prisoners in preparation for death. She would choose their tattooed designs, and then after they died, she would use their designed skin to make lampshades and other home decor items.
Awesome.
Ed was fascinated
Mm-hmm.
by these stories, many of which were fantasy. This was really the only real thing he was interested in, but a lot of fantasy stories of adventure and mayhem. And soon he started to confuse that fiction with his real life. He wanted to be an adventurer, a pirate, a tattooist of Auschwitz.
Something interesting.
Um, on November 16th, 1957, Ed Gein was arrested at a grocery store in West Plainfield after it was discovered that he was likely the last person to have seen Bernice Worden. While he was being detained, the Waushara County Sheriff's Department headed just given up. Headed to the Gein farm to see if they could find Bernice. They checked in a shed on the property and found Bernice's headless body hanging upside down by her legs, with a crossbar across her ankles and ropes around her wrists. Her torso had been split open the way one would dress a deer after hunting. This is what I found a picture of online when I was trying to find the. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think what freaked me out the most was the way she was cut.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be particularly graphic, but having had seen this picture, her vagina was splayed open. I was like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing the most?
Mm-hmm.
Just pulling her. I don't get it. Which probably, I mean, good for me.
Yes.
And they pointed out in Morbid, imagine going to find a missing woman and that's how you find her.
Yeah.
And I've seen that picture is burned into my brain.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there.
And when you're looking for a missing person, you're obviously thinking hopefully we find her alive, but worst case scenario, we find her dead.
And
you're thinking
at the time,
oh, this is worse than worst.
Yeah. And the guy that they suspect is just the town weirdo.
Yeah.
Everyone knows him. Everyone hires him to work for them. He's tiny.
Yeah.
He's just an oddball. He's a loner, but he couldn't do this. We all know Ed. He's just silly Ed. It was scary. Authorities searched the house as well and found that several rooms had been blocked off. Gein had boarded up any rooms his mother had used, including the parlor, living room, and the entire upstairs. These rooms were pristine and had been left just as they had been the day Augusta died. Yeah, it's not
Interesting.
fucking good. Gein had been living in a small room next to the kitchen.
She just
In,
never been in that room?
I guess not.
Or the kitchen?
Well, he has to use the kitchen. In this room, police found the following. Bear with me. Human bones, both whole and in fragments. A wastebasket made of human skin. Chairs reupholstered with human skin. Human skulls attached to Gein's bedposts. Female skulls with the tops sawn off. Bowls made out of human skulls, like little candy dishes. A corset made from a female torso. Leggings made from human leg skin. 9 death
Leggings in 1950. Wow.
progressive.
Mm-hmm.
9 death masks made of female heads. 9 vulvae in a shoebox, each of which seemed to have been part of a different experiment. Like one had been covered in salt, just different things had been done to them. A young girl's dress, 2 more vulvae that belonged to teenagers, a belt made from female nipples, 4 human noses, a pair of human lips on a window shade drawstring. That's what he pulled his window open and closed with. A lampshade made from the skin of a human face, female fingernails, and a doorbell made from a woman's nipple.
I'm really shocked that you did not give a content warning this time.
Oh, I didn't. Content warning for mutilation. I think I kind of assumed that everyone knows about Ed Gein. Amongst
I was trying to find the skull bedpost, so I was just looking
the
at
pictures of the room, it's atrocious.
a hoarder.
It's so messy.
Yeah.
Amongst these horrors, they also found Bernice Worden's entire head in a burlap sack and her heart in a plastic bag by the stove.
Had he just not gotten to it yet?
It was the same day.
Oh, okay.
So
why are there Ed Gein inspired bedroom lamps?
go on Etsy, you can
Yep.
buy crocheted nipple belts.
What in the frig, dude?
We're gonna get into that too, don't worry. There were also body parts of another local woman who had gone missing. Gein had in his possession a death mask made from Mary Hogan's facial skin in a paper bag, and her skull was in a box. Police took photos of the evidence for the state crime lab, and then they were able to question Gein about the atrocities they had found. It took a while for Gein to come clean about all of the crimes he had committed, but when he did, he confessed to stealing from 9 graves between 1947 and 1952.
I was gonna say, when you said they found stuff from another missing woman, I was like, surely lots of them, right? But he's a grave robber?
Mm-hmm. He claimed that he had made approximately 40 late-night trips to 3 different local cemeteries to exhume bodies. According to Gein, he would get irresistible urges to dig bodies out of their graves, and each time, just when he thought he had convinced himself not to, he would find himself already in the cemetery, dazed, digging up a woman he did not know. During most of these blackouts...
There was not, frequent dug-up graves? There's no evidence of this?
You'll see. During most of these blackouts, Gein would come out of his stupor in time to realize what he was doing and put the graves back as he had found them before leaving. Every once in a while, though, he would fully dig up recently buried women and take their bodies home to be tanned and dismembered. Even in this daze-like state, though, he managed to only dig up middle-aged women who somewhat resembled his mother.
Awesome.
Interesting. You're blacked out, but...
Okay. Yeah.
Gein led investigators to the locations of the 9 graves he had confessed to stealing from, and police were able to confirm that each one was empty and had been dug up recently after burial. So they didn't notice because they were already dug
It's like
up.
fresh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The police originally had trouble believing Gein's story due to his size and stature, but after seeing so many caskets empty of bodies, his story was corroborated. Gein also confessed to wearing the corset, leggings, and death masks around his farm after dark as a woman suit to feel closer to his mother.
Is he blacked out when he's doing this?
No, he's
Okay.
he's frolicking. He's pleased. When he wore the suit, he explained he was gone, and instead his mother was the one present. He was not Ed anymore. He was Augusta. He denied ever engaging in sex acts or eating any of the bodies because he thought they smelled bad. Did not
I'm
stop
sure
him from wearing them.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
So they don't smell bad enough for me to not wear them.
On my face.
After all of his confessions, Sheriff Art Schlee banged Gein's head and face into a brick wall, and his confessions at those times were deemed inadmissible.
Okay, Sheena Shay.
Like, a part of me is like, okay, I can't blame you. But also, like, now his confessions are gone.
You fucking ruined
It's a lot.
this. Thank you.
During the investigation, Gein confessed to murdering 51-year-old Mary Hogan and 58-year-old Bernice Worden. Oh my god, I really say it wrong. Gein claimed to have lost any detailed memory of Mary Hogan's murder, but her cause of death was a gunshot wound to the back of the head caused by a .32 caliber Mauser pistol.
Doesn't that kind of ruin the body, the skull, the skin, all of it? Like,
So on Morbid, they explained like something about like a Mauser, I think, like what makes it different, but I don't remember what it was. Hogan was a tavern owner who had disappeared from her place of work on December 8th, 1954. Luckily, police had more information on what had happened to Bernice Worden. Gein had been coming around her family hardware store more and more often, just kind of hanging out and bothering her. Despite her annoyance with Gein, Bernice remained kind to him and treated him as she would any of her other customers. On November 15th, 1957, the day before Bernice was killed, Gein had come into the shop to ask if they sold antifreeze. Bernice told him that they did, and he told her that he would come back the next day to purchase some. I don't know why he couldn't do it right then.
Yeah, what?
He made small talk with Bernice.
He's like, I was just
asking her,
checking.
yeah,
I don't really
he's
need
like,
it, just checking.
no. He asked Bernice if her family was going on Plainfield's annual hunting trip the following day.
They all go as like a community.
She told him that her son and husband would be there, but that she would continue manning the store by herself. With that information in mind, Gein returned the following day, knowing Bernice would be alone. He purchased the antifreeze as promised. Bernice wrote him a receipt, and then Gein asked her if he could look at one of the firearms the store was selling. She allowed him to look at it and mull it over. It's like an empty gun. She's like, I don't care if you look at it. And as she was looking out of the shop window, Gein loaded the gun up with bullets he had brought from home and shot Bernice Worden in the back.
They just happened to be the right bullets.
I
with
think
a quickness,
that's part of him coming
he was
the
studying.
day before. Yeah. He was like, what do I need for that? Then he drove her body back to his farm. When police arrested him that night, they asked him if he knew where Bernice was, and he told them very plainly, I took her to my farm. Weird ass question. As time went on and Gein provided more information to police, it was discovered that Gein had been following Mary Hogan the way he had been following Bernice Worden. He claimed that one day he went into Mary's tavern and he was struck by how similar she looked to his mother, but how different she was in terms of ideals and personality.
Because she was probably a harlot.
She was. He says.
I'm like, Mary.
His mother hated alcohol, and here Mary was owning her own tavern.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why he keep going for the business owners?
It was also discovered that she had been dressed the same way that Bernice had, not like wearing her clothes the same way, but like the deer thing.
Mutilated in the same way.
Yes. Gein claimed that Mary's murder satiated his need to kill and collect body parts for several years until he murdered Bernice. In addition to the confirmed murders of Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden, Gein is suspected of some other murders as well. He continuously denied being involved in any of these other murders, and a polygraph test seemingly exonerated him.
I was gonna say, do we not feel like he's the type that would just say, like, yeah?
It
Like,
took him
that
a
would
really
just
long
admit
time to confess.
to Mary and Bernice?
Yeah.
It was, like, just because he was, like, met with, like, kind of
Yeah, he's like, what do I
irrefutable.
say? Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
But they
his psych-
found. Okay, sorry.
his psychiatrist also believed that he couldn't be held responsible for these other murders, as he seemed to only target women who physically resembled his mother. But that didn't stop others from speculating if he may have additional victims.
And the others, like, just so much didn't
Yes.
resemble her? Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you who they are. 8-year-old Georgia
Oh.
Jean Weckler disappeared from her family farm in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin on May 1st, 1947 at about 3:30 p.m. She had ridden home from her school in Jefferson, Wisconsin with a neighbor who then dropped her off at the lane that led from US Highway 12 to the Weckler farm home. Georgia made it back to her house, as witnesses saw her at her mailbox removing a stack of mail. After that, though, she was never seen again. Neighbors reported seeing an out-of-place vehicle that afternoon, a dark 1936-ish Ford sedan with a gray plastic spotlight, which matched the description of Gein's car, a black 1937 Ford sedan. Victor Harold Travis, a 43-year-old resident of Adams County, Wisconsin, disappeared on the evening of November 1st, 1952, along with his 43-year-old friend Raymond Burgess of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
No way. He didn't kill 2 men, right?
Well, the pair went deer hunting that day on a farm in Plainfield, despite the owner asking them to leave. Later that afternoon, after they were finished hunting, the 2 men made their way to Mac's Bar in Plainfield for drinks. They stayed there for quite some time before leaving the bar at around 7 p.m. They got into Raymond's car and drove off, but the 2 men and their car were never seen again. The farmer, whose property they were hunting on, was Ed Gein. And he had
Oh.
specifically told them not to.
But they were already done? Like,
No, like they said, can we hunt on your property? And he said no, and then they did it anyway.
no, I know, but by the time they go missing, like, they weren't on his property. So he would have, like,
Yes.
followed them to the
Yes.
bar, like, punished them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Possible. Fine.
Yes. 15-year-old Evelyn Grace Hartley went missing on the evening of October 24th, 1953, from La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was Gein's hometown. Evelyn had been out that night babysitting Viggo Rasmussen's 20-month-old daughter. Viggo worked as a professor at La Crosse State College. Evelyn was supposed to be back from the Rasmussens at 8:30 p.m., but when she failed to return home on time, her father, Richard, called the Rasmussen home several times. As his calls continued to go unanswered, he decided to drive over to the home and check on Evelyn himself. When he got to the house, he found the lights on and the radio on. Items were scattered all over the place. The living room furniture had been moved around. Evelyn's school books were strewn across the room. He continued through the house and found one of Evelyn's shoes downstairs with her books, and her other shoe upstairs with her broken glasses. But Evelyn was nowhere to be found. After Gein's arrest and finding 2 teenage vulvas in his home, police began to speculate if he could be responsible for Evelyn's disappearance. They found no definitive evidence of Evelyn in the Gein home, but there is some question surrounding the 2 teenage vulvas found on the farm, as they do not match any of the women Gein was confirmed to have dug up from their graves or murdered. In June, and also Evelyn's never been found, so we don't know if she's missing a vulva or not.
Right. Or
In
every other
June,
part of her body.
in June of 1954, 32-year-old James Walsh disappeared. He and his wife were neighbors of Gein's. After James's disappearance, Gein made himself welcome at the Walsh home, coming by frequently to help James's wife around the house. Then in August of 1956, Irene Keating went missing from Plainfield. She was 30 years old. Um, Gein was also a suspect. That's all I got about her.
Awesome.
She was 30 years old.
Okay.
Gein was also a suspect in the attempted abduction of 16-year-old Judy Rodenkall. Judy was a high school student in Auroraville, Wisconsin, which is near Oshkosh and about 33 miles from Plainfield. She left home on the morning of October 30th, 1956 to head to her bus stop, but the bus never picked her up and she never made it to school. That evening, her boyfriend came to her house to pick her up for a date. And when she wasn't there and ready for their outing, he knew something was wrong. Police began looking for her the following day, which was Halloween.
Ooh.
Her socks and handkerchief were found about a mile away on a bridge near Mill Pond. Bloodhounds tracked her scent to that spot and then lost her trail. On November 2nd at 7:30 p.m., a farmer named Edgar Tim found Judy barefoot, cold, unconscious, but alive in a shack on his property. When she woke up, she was in a state of shock and was taken to the hospital. There, she claimed to have blacked out during those 3 days of being missing and could not account for anything that had happened during that time. She was released after about a week in the hospital, and investigators began looking into who could have done this. Judy's case was quickly linked to that of Evelyn Hartley, as they were very similar in appearance and age. Judy's case was closed without the identity of her kidnapper ever being confirmed.
Yeah, I don't know. Would he put her still alive, like on someone else's property?
Right.
But I was starting to think, like, I don't know, obviously, what these girls look like, but like, if he probably has like pictures of his mother as a younger person. Like, does he think like they look like his mother
Right.
once did? Like, I don't know.
I do wonder, he claims like he gets these urges, he blacks out, and then sometimes he wakes up in the middle and he's like, oh shit, like I don't want to be doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
he puts it all back. So like I wonder if he would argue if he did do this to Judy, if that may have been what happened, that he got all this way through the kidnapping and then he was like, oh my god, like I've taken a girl. And he just like
Yeah.
threw her in a shed and peaced out. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, many have come to wonder if Ed Gein is responsible for the death of his brother, Henry Gein.
Really?
Shocking!
Wow.
Maybe Henry did not die of heart failure. And maybe
In the middle of a field before a fire, he said.
Yeah. And maybe the bruising found on his face and around his neck was his real cause of death at the hands of his own brother. Maybe that's why Ed was able to lead investigators directly to Henry's body. Who knows?
Wild.
Other than Henry, do you think that Ed Gein is responsible for any of the other crimes we just discussed? I think he definitely killed those guys who went hunting on his farm.
Yeah. I mean, certainly maybe. I mean, I get it that like I don't know. I obviously would have to know, like, is every body part in his bedroom like accounted for? Like, probably not. Like, it sounds like there's a lot, and then
the teenage things definitely unaccounted for.
Right. And so I just feel like, yes, it makes sense that like anything within the area where like they have absolutely not been found, like you have to like consider him.
Right.
I think it's also like hard to know because it depends on like how much you believe. I guess it doesn't, but like depends on how much you believe this blackout thing, because like if you're truly blacking out, like you said earlier, like ironically, he's blacked out, but he seems to only be picking people that do look like his mother, but it's like maybe he has a lot more mistakes than like we knew about, and he got an 8-year-old that obviously doesn't look like his mother, and like that's a mistake because he was blacked out, and like so maybe there are a lot more like just oh no, that's not who I wanted.
They said they found a young girl's dress in his home.
Yeah.
And the car thing, I think could possibly. The 8-year-old, I really want to be like, no, that doesn't make sense. But like the dress and the car, I really do think he had something to do with Evelyn's death based on the vulvas.
Yeah. But it also seems like maybe the like specificity and like saying like this is what I don't know, it's hard because I'm like maybe that is like him making excuses and being like, oh, it was just people that looked like my mom, or it was like just whatever. Maybe there's like way more than that, and he really just liked killing, you know? But then it's also like if you were purposefully hiding details to make yourself look better, like you maybe wouldn't admit you're wearing people's skin and like dressing up as a woman, your mother specifically. So I don't know, like because it just feels so like his thought is just like so disorganized, and like what he shares, what he doesn't share, what his motives are, what he is like getting out of this, because it's like if all of those people are his victims and possibly like others that we don't know about, like then he just likes to kill people.
Right.
But and I don't know like
get into
where
his mental state next.
Yeah, and I don't know like would that with the timeline would that mean that like he was killing and grave robbing like in between one another, or is it like there's a grave robbing phase and then a killing phase, or it's all mixed in?
The grave robbing was between 1947 to 1952.
Okay.
And the first question that the 8-year-old was 1947. The two hunters were 1952, and then everything else is after that.
Okay.
So I don't know. Gein was arraigned on November 21st, 1957 on one count of first-degree murder for the murder of Bernice Worden. During his confessions, it was obvious to investigators that Gein, while not boastful or proud of his crimes, was also not remorseful. He was very matter-of-fact about everything. Those women whose graves he dug up were not using those body parts anymore, so why couldn't he have them? He said, I don't understand.
Passionate about recycling.
Yeah.
He said, what's the problem here?
Yeah. I am just a DIY girly.
Yeah.
And I'm on low budget. He knew that these things were against the law, but he did not seem to understand why it was considered morally wrong. He said, like, I know I shouldn't have done that because it's against the law, but like I don't understand why I can't have their body parts if they're done with them.
Yeah. He said they should have been organ donors anyway.
To me.
Yeah.
At one point while awaiting trial, Gein requested to speak to a minister about the things he had done. Reverend Kenneth Engelman, a 33-year-old Methodist minister, met with Gein in his cell. Afterwards, he spoke to the press saying that Gein was very upset about the fact that he had been caught and was getting in trouble. He insisted that Gein needed serious psychological help. When pressed about whether Gein expressed remorse for his actions, he said that he never did, only for the fact that he was now going to be in trouble.
It does suck to get in trouble, Ed.
At his arraignment in Waushara County Court, Gein pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. At first, the prosecution was not pleased with this, but there was no way they were going to be able to argue that Gein was a sane person. Both sides of the they were like,
that's fair.
It is what it is. Both sides of the court requested to have Gein psychologically evaluated, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and found mentally incompetent and unfit for trial.
Yeah.
He was sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. a maximum security facility in Waupun, Wisconsin, before being transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. This insanity plea, though, begged the question, is Ed Gein truly not guilty due to insanity when it was clear that he had been so premeditated? He brought ammunition to Bernice Worden's store. And made sure she was going to be alone. He had intentionally dug up graves that were already disturbed due to their recent burial status. Although I kind of wonder, does that have something to do with the fact that it would be easier?
Like, you mean like he just like arrived soil there and was like, oh, this looks easier. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, this is like, especially in a blackout state, like, I don't know what he's doing. He's doing a lot of thinking in the blackout state, I guess. He even provided a motive for why he chose Mary and Bernice in particular. Mary, he said, was a woman with a nasty mouth and was involved in shady business dealings. And Bernice, according to rumors that Gein had heard, had stolen her husband away from another woman, resulting in that woman's death by suicide. He said she's a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know your thoughts on this as well. Does premeditation counteract legal insanity, or can both exist at the same time?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before in a couple other cases. They can definitely both exist. Yeah. I guess like legally, like I don't really know. Like if the argument has to be that you were like unaware of like what you were doing, then like yes, I guess premeditation like does change that. But like whether or not he was psychotic,
Right.
and like kind of like in the end isn't responsible for his actions, I think like premeditation can definitely exist there. Unfortunately, like it's so easy to say like, well, if you're like psychotic, like you just like do stuff and like you don't think about it, and it's like that's like not true. Like if you have schizophrenia and you have like deep delusions, like he has these like what's the like moral delusions about like what this means about these women, and that like he's vindicate, like he's like doing the right thing by like getting rid of them. Like these can be like long held beliefs, but like it's still his illness that is telling him like I need to take Bernice out. And like you can still like amidst that like no, I shouldn't do it in front of a bunch of people, you know, or like your voices could be like you need to get her alone. So like I think the idea that like you plan something does not negate that like it was still like a thought based in illness. And I think that sucks that like he made the conscious choice. But like if he is truly schizophrenic, like these doctors say, then like, and it's like affected by like these are fixed beliefs given to him by his mother, like true beliefs.
He is I think at this point in time in 2024, we can say that Ed Gein is also a victim of religious abuse by his mother. He was made to believe these like fundamental things by her that are not true.
Yeah. But then if he's also ill, like this is going to like he's going to be able to convince himself that like this is the right thing to do. And I even think like as kind of like sad as the whole like, well, they're not using their bodies, like why can't I take them? Like as sad as that is to think that like a grown man like thinks that, that is like pretty like enlightening to know that like he, if we believe him, of course, but like if that is truly what he believes, is like I just like don't get it, you know, like I don't get it. And like I have said this before, like I work with people who are mentally ill, and like the idea that you would like say to someone like I don't see why that's a problem, like that's like very real, like him being like I'm not understanding, like in my head I've already justified this to the nth degree, so like I don't get it.
I would argue also that it seems that if we're believing him, that this insanity is driving his premeditation.
Right.
Like, he is so desperate to recreate his mother or whatever it is that he's trying to do that he's like, I have to get this done, and here's the easiest or the best way for me to do it.
I think that people don't realize that, like, delusions can have end goals.
Yeah.
And, like, your delusion, if your illness is just like killing is so fun and prison, who cares if you go to prison, then you might just be like a havoc wreaker and you may just walk in places and like shoot lots of people. But like if the end goal is like you have to be connected to your mom, to be not alone or whatever, like you have to achieve this end, then like I think that like your paranoia, your voices, like your everything will like help you to that end, you know?
Yeah. In 1968, doctors actually determined that Gein was going to be able to have a trial after all, saying he was, quote, mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense.
Yeah, so like his mental fitness, it's so weird to me because like your mental fitness at the time of the crime and then ability to stand trial are like different.
Right.
So then it's like, yes, like he can now have a trial, but wouldn't the same problem come up where like in the trial you're gonna say like, but at the commission of the crime, like he was unwell? So then at that point, like what's the point?
Yes, it would. His trial began on November 7th, 1968, and was held without a jury. During the trial, a psychiatrist testified about his discussions with Gein. He explained that Gein
Do we know why there wasn't a jury? Is it just because like the guilt has
they had requested that he not have a jury.
Oh.
Like his defense team said, we don't want him to have his jury trial.
Do you think that's just because like his like actual guilt is like pretty much like determined, so now it's just like determining the semantics and stuff?
Yeah, I also think that this was a very, very, very big case.
Oh, okay.
And so I think that there's like, and it had been like 10 years.
They're like, this is not going to be good.
Yeah. He explained that Gein had told him that he did not know whether he had killed Worden intentionally or accidentally. He remembered examining the gun in the hardware store, and he remembered the weapon discharging and killing Worden, but he did not remember aiming the gun at Worden or any other part of the morning, he said. Gein's trial lasted a week, and at the end of it, Judge Robert H. Goldmer found Gein guilty. There was a second trial to determine Gein's sanity, and after listening to testimony from doctors, Goldmer ruled Gein not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was sent back to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Gein spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital. He died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute of respiratory failure secondary to lung cancer on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. While he was on trial, police had to work overtime to keep people away from the Gein farm. The property had been appraised at $4,700, which is about $50,000 today.
For 155 acres?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty good, I feel like.
That's like
no,
how
that's not good.
Well, I don't know what you mean like good.
Land.
That's
a lot of fucking land.
I know. I'm saying it should be way more than that.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's a good price.
For a buyer. I meant like
right. Yeah.
If that's my land, like what?
Well, but also
I'm saying I mean that's kind of what I'm wondering. Like, is that like the price just because they're like no one wants this?
Yeah. This is after the fact. While the handmade artifacts were disposed of after being taken to the crime lab, the rest of Gein's possessions were set to be auctioned off on March 30th, 1958. However, early on the morning of March 20th, the house was destroyed by a fire. Arson was suspected, but it was quickly determined that the cause was a garbage fire set about 75 feet from the home, started by a cleaning crew. The only issue with this claim was the fact that the fire they were talking about had not spread to the Gein house. It is highly likely that the fire chief Frank Worden, did not look into this case because Ed Gein had killed his mother.
Yeah.
When Gein heard of the fate of his family farm, he simply shrugged his shoulders and said, just as well.
Okay.
Gein's car was sold at auction for $760, which amounts to about $8,000 today, to a carnival sideshow operator named Bunny Gibbons of Rockford, Illinois, who used it as a fun fair attraction and charged a 25-cent admission fee to see it.
Tasteful.
After, thank you, Bunny. After Gein's death in 1984, his gravestone became a tourist attraction. People would come to see it and chip off pieces to take with them as souvenirs. In the year 2000, the stone itself was stolen from the Plainfield Cemetery and was recovered in June of 2001 near Seattle, Washington.
What if by that point it was like just a rock?
If you look at pictures of his tombstone, you can see where people like literally like chipped pieces off. The stone is now in storage at the Waushara County Sheriff's Department. While Gein's grave is now technically unmarked, it is still identifiable as he is laid to rest between his parents and his brother. So it's just an unmarked grave that happens to be between
in the Gein family.
Yeah.
Who's this fourth Gein? Who knows?
So weird. Never heard of that one. Over the years, the story of Ed Gein and his crimes against humanity have made their way into pop culture several times over. It is a loose inspiration for, and sometimes not so loose, for several books and films. Gein was the inspiration for the films Deranged, In the Light of the Moon, House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and the characters Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, Dr. Oliver Thredson from American Horror Story and Asylum, and of course, Norman Bates from Robert Bloch's novel Psycho and Alfred Hitchcock's movie by the same name. He is also the inspiration for some music, such as Slayer's Dead Skin Mask.
Oh, yeah.
Tad's Nipple Belt. And all of the songs in Ed Gein the Musical.
I would venture to guess.
Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield and the Plainfield Ghoul. What do you think of him and his influence on pop culture? Is that so icky?
Yeah, I think it's so icky.
Which like I love Psycho. I love Bates Motel. And here's the thing.
I'm not gonna lie, I have seen none of those things, so
I think
doesn't affect me, but
I also love Silence of the Lambs. I think that it's one thing to make a horror movie based on horrific things that someone in real life did. It's a horror movie. It's supposed to be scary and like gross. But like, why is there an Ed Gein the musical?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the part. That's kind of I think where I draw the line. If you're using real life like true crime as a basis or inspiration
for scary things,
something that's supposed to be terrible, sure.
Yeah.
But why are we making a musical? What are the songs like in Ed Gein the Musical?
Yeah.
Gross.
Rough. Oh man. It's also
That's
just
the story
like
of Ed Gein.
Yeah, it's also just like changes every like I don't know. This is where I struggle because like you throw psychosis in and like it changes everything for me. And like the blackout episodes, like again, like people who are psychotic, like you could be like with them and they're like they are like sure of their decisions and they're like my brother is gonna kill my mom, so like I have to kill him. But then like when they are well, like they will have no memory of those things.
And I think even thinking about it for like everyday average Joes who don't have psychosis, like think about like times where you've been drunk and like you don't remember it, but like the next morning your friends are telling you like everything you did when you were blackout drunk and you were so sure of yourself and you were like slurring, but you were making so much sense. this.
And when
you
you're
were
telling your friends, like, I am
thinking,
not drunk.
right. And like, it's so like a part of me is like, yes, like,
yeah,
they're like, oh, he's blacked out. How is he doing all these things? And I'm like, but it blacked out doesn't mean that he's like seeing black.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what's happening. Like he just doesn't remember it.
Right. Like in the moment, like a blackout is not a blackout. Like a blackout is a blackout in hindsight. It's like memory loss. But like it doesn't mean that like in that moment he isn't still, like I said, like focused on that end goal. Should look like my mom. Should achieve this end. Like and it's just that like later that was such a whatever
and
moment that he can't remember it.
Yeah. When people talk about Ed Gein, they say like, well, there are plenty of people with schizophrenia, plenty of people with religious trauma, and plenty of people with these backgrounds who don't do this. Like, yes, that's true. But if it truly is like rooted in his mental illness and like that he does not know what he's doing when it's happening, then like he didn't know he was doing it. Like, and I think we can still hold him responsible for all the things he did afterwards, like tearing your bodies apart.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
for sure, but like he's clearly mentally ill.
There seem to be things that he does know he is doing,
Right.
And like that's where like the legal definition gets, I think, dicey, where it's like even when he's turning them into lamps or chairs or whatever, bowls, like he seems to know what he's doing, right? Because he says like, I don't get it. I needed a bowl. They didn't need their skull. Like, whatever. What's the problem here?
The Nazis did it.
Like,
why
who cares?
Can't I do it?
So it's like, yes, he's like aware, but I think that it's like hard to say whether someone that is ill can like logically determine like right from wrong, and like that's where like it seems like no, like it seems like he is not understanding why that is wrong.
Right. He's like, I understand that you made this law, but like I don't know why you made that a law.
Right. But I also think that's like hard in the reverse, because it's like someone with schizophrenia, when they're not in active psychosis, should be entirely held responsible for their own actions and should be like, you know, like maybe, I mean, sometimes there are still like your voices kind of just like are there or like whatever. But like that I think is where the legal definition is hard, is like if you're not in like the active, like debilitating psychotic state, but he has these fixed delusions that are partially from his schizophrenia, but partially from his mom, like it's like so confusing. But I do think like at the end of the day, like he's off the streets either way. So like what does it matter to be a little bit more, not even like gracious, but like to err on the side of like he's ill. He's still in a freaking institution. Like just
I was gonna say, regardless, I think of whether what we think about him, he ended up where he should have been. You know, like he should not have been allowed to be at his home alone. For anybody's safety, including his own. And he also probably shouldn't have been in prison, because I don't think that would have been a safe place for him or other people either. I think he ended up exactly where he needed to be. And truthfully, especially given that this was the 50s, the 40s, 50s, I think it was handled pretty much exactly how it should have been handled. Maybe minus the pushing his head into a brick wall.
Sure. Yeah.
But everything else, I think, good job.
Yeah, and there are like civil commitments that are specifically like mentally ill and dangerous, and like there's a reason for that. And then you think about like prison, that like I must say, like I'm speaking from 2024, but like prisons are able and do like administer antipsychotics. But like you think about like if he was in prison and got psychotic and like got unwell again, like you think he doesn't have the ability to, like we've seen, like the premeditation can happen in the psychosis. Like you don't think this man is going to make some tools and start like skinning other inmates? Like this is not where he needs to be.
Like he, especially if he's saying oh, you can't hold me like I shouldn't be guilty because I can't control myself.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and like someone can have like really, really dangerous beliefs, whether they're well or not well.
Right.
And like him being sick doesn't change the fact that like we cannot let you just run around when you believe like women who own bars should be killed and bodies are just up for grabs. Like, sorry, buddy, can't be out there.
Now that you've said that,
mm-hmm.
we've had to make some tough choices.
Yeah, sorry, friend.
All right, that's the end of the story.
That was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
You're so welcome.
Sorry, I had too much commentary. I feel like you're rushing me off.
No, I'm not. I'm glad you have so much commentary.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot to process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And next week we'll start a 4-part series.
Mm-hmm. I'm 2 pages in so far.
To writing it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, friends. Bye.
Okay. Bye.